The year was 1865, and the snow fell like judgment. It came thick from the heavens, veiling the Wyoming hills in a white silence that buried both tracks and sins. In that hush, a woman moved, a lone figure hunched beneath a threadbare wool cloak, her skirts sodden and clinging to her legs. Her breath came in faint bursts of vapor, each one slower than the last. Temperance McAllister had not eaten in 2 days. The last of her jerky had gone to her horse, Mercy, who now lay frozen stiff beside a splintered wheel and a toppled cart. The beast had fought until the end, nostrils steaming and eyes wide with pleading, before her legs buckled and the snow claimed her. Temperance hadn't cried. There hadn't been tears left to spare. She pressed on, one gloved hand dragging a small pinewood chest behind her, the only thing she'd refused to leave behind. And it were her husband's Bible, a photograph browned by the years, and a letter she never read a second time. The rest had burned in the stove, 3 nights past, traded for heat she barely felt. Her boots cracked with every step, soles worn through and patched with canvas. The storm gnawed at her face, painted her lashes with frost. She hadn't meant to die out here, but she reckoned her intent didn't carry much weight anymore. Temperance had arrived in Windrush 5 weeks ago with a letter of recommendation and a resume of teaching 3 years in St. Louis. She wore widow's black, spoke softly, and asked for nothing more than the chance to teach arithmetic and scripture to children who barely knew one from the other. At first, they welcomed her, nodded kindly in the streets, passed plates of venison stew at the church social. But it hadn't taken long for whispers to fill the pews. A young widow. No family, no chaperone. She wore gloves that showed her fingers, and once she was seen speaking to a ranch hand near the smithy, smiling. By the 2nd week, the pastor's wife stopped speaking to her. By the 4th, the school board declared they'd found someone more suitable to the role. They'd given her till sunrise to leave the teacher's cabin. That sunrise was yesterday. She stumbled now, knees buckling. Her hip struck a rock hidden beneath the snow. Pain lanced through her, sharp enough to wrench a groan from her lips. She rolled to her back, gasping, eyes stinging as flakes settled on her lashes. Overhead, the sky was gray as iron, heavy with the weight of more to come. "Lord," she murmured, "don't let it end like this." No answer came but the wind. She thought then of Elijah, his hand on hers that final morning, his voice weak beneath fever. "Promise me you'll find a life. Don't let them keep you buried beside me." She tried. God knew she tried. Her eyes drifted shut. She felt her body slacken, surrender to the snow's hush. She thought of children's laughter, the scent of ink on fresh paper, the warmth of Elijah's arms in the early dawn. Then came the sound of hooves. She didn't stir, not until a man's voice cut through the snow like a whip crack. "Damn fool woman." A heavy shadow fell across her face. She squinted against the white glare and saw a man dismounting. A shape wrapped in oilskin and leather, face shadowed beneath a slouched hat rimmed with ice. His boots crunched close. He knelt beside her, a scowl drawn hard across his bearded face. "Still breathing?" he muttered, pressing 2 fingers to her throat. Barely. He yanked the chest from her hand and slung it over his saddle. Then, with surprising care, he gathered her into his arms. The warmth of his coat hit her like a furnace. She moaned, breath catching. "I got you," he muttered. The last thing she heard was the thud of hooves pounding through snow. When she woke, the world was firelight and the smell of pine. Her mouth tasted like copper. She shifted, wincing as warmth soaked through her limbs. Her boots were gone. Her hands, still red and raw, had been wrapped in clean cloth. She turned her head and saw him, sitting in the shadows by the door, cleaning a rifle. "You're alive," he said flatly. She blinked. "Where am I?" "Half a day's ride from where you ought to be. Found you near frozen east of Windrush. Cabin's abandoned, but it'll hold through the storm." He didn't look up from his rifle. "Name's Callahan. Jude Callahan." She tried to sit, and a wave of dizziness crashed into her. He rose, crossed the room, and knelt beside the cot. "Easy," he said, bracing her back with a strong hand. "You get up too fast, you'll go sideways." Her voice was barely a rasp. "Why'd you help me?" He shrugged. "Didn't much feel like digging a grave." She stared. "So kindness isn't part of it?" "I don't deal in kindness, ma'am. Just practicality. Didn't figure you'd last another hour." He stood again, set the rifle aside, and stirred the stew pot hanging over the fire. "What's your name?" "Temperance. That what you go by? Or what your folks hoped you'd grow into?" Her lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. "It's my name." He didn't smile back. "All right, Temperance. I'll get you some broth. Eat slow." He poured it into a tin cup and knelt again, offering it carefully. She drank, slow and deliberate. It burned going down. She welcomed the sting. "How long have I been here?" "Half a day. Maybe more. Storm's still howling. Road's re-gone. You're not going anywhere." "I wasn't headed to anywhere." His eyes, dark and unreadable, flicked over her face. "Then you're in worse shape than I thought." She didn't argue. The fire popped. Shadows danced on the log walls. The wind shrieked outside, rattling loose boards. "You traveling alone?" "I was." He narrowed his eyes. "That horse I passed, that yours?" Her name was Mercy. She earned it. Silence stretched between them. He broke it with a sigh. "Well, Mercy's gone, and the snow ain't letting up. You can stay till the weather turns. After that, we ride." "I can't ride." "Then I'll drag you in a sled." "But you're not staying." "Cabin's not mine. Won't take long for someone notices the smoke." She studied him. "You always this kind to strangers?" He shot her a look. "I told you, I ain't kind." Still, he handed her another sip. Still, he'd taken her from the snow. Still, he'd wrapped her in his coat. Her fingers curled into the blanket. "You're a cowboy," she said. He grunted. "Headed where?" "South." "For what?" "Not running from anything. If that's what you're skinned." "No," she said softly. "But maybe run into something?" He looked at her sharply then, something raw passing through his eyes. She didn't press. That night, as the wind howled and the fire crackled low, she lay still and watched him sleep. He'd left his boots on, hat tilted over his face. His rifle rested near his hand. Her gaze drifted to her chest in the corner, the one thing she hadn't left behind. She rose, bare feet silent on the wood, and opened the lid. Inside, the photograph stared back. Elijah in his Sunday best, eyes full of gentle conviction. Next to it, the letter he'd written before the fever took him. She hadn't dared read it again. Not after the first time. It felt too much like letting go. She closed the lid gently. A creak behind her. She turned. Jude stood, one hand on the wall, watching her in the dark. "I ain't gonna ask what's in it," he said. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't care about your past. But if it catches up with us, I aim to know which direction to shoot." Her throat tightened. "There's no one chasing me." "Good. Let's keep it that way." He turned and settled back into his blanket. She didn't sleep for a long time. She lay with her back to the fire, eyes open, listening to the wind and the silence. And sometime near dawn, she thought she heard something in the storm outside. A voice, no louder than a whisper. Then nothing. Only the wind. Only the dark. Only the slow, steady sound of Jude Callahan's breathing beside her. The storm broke 2 days later, just after sunrise. It didn't so much end as exhale, its fury spent, leaving behind a brittle silence that wrapped the world in white. Trees stood bowed and broken under snowdrifts thick as tombstones. The cabin groaned in its timbers, but it had held. Temperance woke to the smell of frying bacon. Her stomach clenched with longing. Jude stood by the hearth, sleeves rolled, hair tousled, a scar peeking from beneath the edge of his collar. His movements were practiced, efficient, no wasted steps. He didn't look over as she sat up, but his voice carried easy across the room. "You eat today. No arguments." She didn't argue. Her body was too hollow for pride. He gave her a plate and poured coffee into a chipped mug, black as pitch and twice as bitter. She ate in silence, her hands still wrapped, fingers trembling with the effort of holding fork and tin. When she'd finished, he stepped toward the door, dragging on his coat and wrapping a scarf tight around his jaw. "Where are you going?" she asked, the edge in her voice sharper than she meant it. "Gotta check the trail. If it's passable, we ride by midday." "To where?" "South. Nearest town's Ash Ridge." Ain't much more than a saloon and a stable, but there's warmth. And people. She hesitated. What if people are the problem? He paused at the threshold, hand on the doorframe. They always are, ma'am. But some of 'em cook better than I do. The door creaked open, and cold wind spilled into the room like a warning. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the fire in her thoughts. Temperance stood slowly. Her legs ached, but she welcomed the pain. It meant life. She walked to the window, careful of the warped floorboards, and pulled back the curtain with fingers numb from days of frostbite. Outside, Jude moved through the snow like he belonged to it. His horse, a dun-colored gelding with a white blaze, pawed the ground impatiently as Jude examined the trail with a frown. He was cautious, careful, the kind of man who didn't trust easily, if at all. And yet he'd taken her in, fed her, saved her. The why of it still gnawed at her. When he returned, snow clinging to his coat like salt, he didn't speak, just nodded once and began saddling the horses. She gathered her few things, the pinewood chest, now light with the weight of the past, and wrapped herself in every layer she could find. Jude helped her onto the gelding without a word. His hands were firm, but not unkind. "Stay close. Don't talk unless you need to," he said. "And if we run into trouble, let me do the shooting." "What kind of trouble?" His gaze cut to her. "The kind that's usually wearing a badge. Or wants one." They rode out slow, hooves crunching through hard-crusted snow. The trees hung silent, their bare limbs black against the blue-tinged white. No birds, no wind, just the rhythmic creak of saddle leather and the occasional snore of the horses. For a time, neither spoke. Then, after miles of silence, she said, "You've done this before." He didn't look at her. Done what? Rescued women from dying in the snow. Fought storms. Carried people south. His mouth twitched. "Not the first storm I've seen." She waited, but he said no more. They passed an old hunter's lean-to, half collapsed under snow. A fox darted out from beneath, vanishing into the woods with barely a sound. "What about you?" he asked suddenly. "You ever plan to go back east?" "No." Her answer was immediate. "There's nothing left back there but gravestones and debts." He nodded slowly. "West of here's gold. East is blood. And the middle's full of fools trying to outrun both." "You think I'm a fool?" He didn't answer. They rode on. By dusk, the light had turned violet, and the sky glowed with the promise of another cold night. Jude signaled to stop near a creek choked with ice and snow. A thicket of trees sheltered a fire pit long abandoned, its stones still black from the last traveler's flame. "We camp here," he said, dismounting. She slid from her horse, landing hard and catching herself with a hiss. "You all right?" he asked, already unpacking. "Fine. Just stiff. You'll be worse tomorrow." He began to build the fire with fast, sure movements. "I'll take first watch. You sleep." She opened her mouth to argue, but the look he gave her stopped her short. So she sat near the fire and watched the flames dance, thinking of Elijah, of the schoolhouse she never got to teach in, of the letter she hadn't dared read. Later, as she lay wrapped in a blanket beside the flickering coals, she heard him shift nearby, boots crunching faintly in the snow. "Tell me something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What? Why'd you really stop for me?" Silence. Then, "You looked like someone I knew. Once. Someone you lost?" His jaw worked. "Yeah." She didn't ask more, but she remembered the look in his eyes that first night, the weight he carried in silence. Around midnight, the scream came. It tore through the woods like a knife, high and human and full of pain. Temperance sat bolt upright, heart pounding. Jude was already on his feet, rifle in hand, gaze scanning the trees. "Stay low," he muttered. The scream came again, closer. Temperance crawled to the tree line, keeping behind a fallen log. In the dim light of the fire, Jude moved forward in a crouch, rifle raised. Then the brush parted, and a figure stumbled into the clearing. A boy, no older than 15. Face bloodied, coat torn, limping hard. "Help me," he gasped, collapsing to his knees. "Please, he's coming." A shot rang out. The boy jerked once, then crumpled face first in the snow. Jude fired back instantly, the echo booming through the trees. "Get behind cover," he barked. Temperance obeyed, crawling back just as two more shots cracked from the dark. One punched into a tree inches from Jude's shoulder. He dove, rolled, fired again. From the shadows, a deep voice snarled, "Hand over the woman, cowboy, and we'll let you live." "Not a chance in hell," Jude called back. Temperance's breath came fast. She reached for the boy, but Jude caught her arm. "Don't move," he hissed. "But he's gone." Tears blurred her vision. The boy's blood soaked into the snow, steaming faintly in the cold. Footsteps circled. Jude shifted low, every muscle taut. "You recognize the voice?" she whispered. "Yeah," he said. "Name's Boone. Used to ride with me. Till he got too fond of talking what didn't belong to him." "Why's he after me?" Jude's jaw clenched. "Because you're with me." A beat. Then he added, softer, "And maybe because he saw your face." Another voice joined Boone's, higher, crueler. "We'll burn you out, Callahan. Burn you both." Jude's eyes narrowed. "They've got oil." Temperance stiffened. "Then we run. No time. We fight. You and me. You shoot." She nodded, slowly. "Better than most." He passed her a revolver from his saddlebag. "Then don't miss." They waited, backs to the fire. The sound of sloshing, oil being poured in a circle. Then a match struck. Flames roared. Jude shot first. Boone dropped mid-throw, oil came tumbling from his hand. The second man screamed, fire licking up his coat. He staggered toward the trees and disappeared into the dark, his cries trailing behind. Silence returned, thick and final. Temperance's hands trembled around the revolver. Jude stood slowly, breathing hard. "That all of them?" she asked. "For now." He kicked snow over the flames, dousing the spread. The boy lay still beside the fire pit, eyes glassy. Temperance knelt and closed them. "We bury him," she said. "We don't have time." "Then we make time." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. They dug with their hands and knives, clearing a hole deep enough to hide the boy from wolves. Jude found a pine branch to mark it. Temperance laid the boy's coat over him. No prayers, just silence. Back at the fire, Jude looked at her differently. "You got more grit than you let on," he said. "I've had to." He didn't argue, just added more wood to the fire, the flames climbing higher. As they sat in the quiet, side by side, she asked, "If they know your name, does that mean more are coming?" "Yes." "Then what do we do?" His eyes met hers, calm, steady, burning like coal. "We run faster. Fight harder. Or both." She nodded slowly. "I can do that." He looked at her chest again, the one she carried like it held her soul. "Whatever's in there," he said. "You ready to let it go?" She drew a breath. Then she stood, opened it, and drew out Elijah's letter. Her hands shook as she unfolded it, reading it once more in the flickering light. "Live, Tempe. Don't carry my ghost. Carry yourself." She fed it to the fire. The flames ate the ink. The words turned to smoke. Jude didn't speak, but something in his shoulders eased. When she turned back to him, her face was calm. "We head for Ash Ridge," she said. He nodded, and behind them, the fire whispered goodbye to everything they'd left behind. The ride into Ash Ridge was anything but easy. Snow turned to mud as they descended from the high pines into the low country. The horses staggered through slush and swollen creeks, wind lashing across the open prairie. Temperance kept her eyes on the horizon, jaw tight, fingers clenched white around the reins. Jude rode ahead, his silhouette dark against the gray dawn, shoulders hunched with caution. They hadn't spoken much since the fire. Some things didn't need words. The boy's death had weighed on them both. So had the gunshots echoing through the woods, the feel of blood-hot metal in her hands, the sight of Boone's face as he fell. Ash Ridge appeared like a ghost town on the edge of a dream, barely more than a road with 24 buildings stretched thin as bones. A crooked saloon sign creaked on rusty hinges. Smoke puffed from the roof of a distant blacksmith's forge. But it was the church steeple, half collapsed and tilting eastward, that told her this place had known loss. They dismounted outside a livery where a wiry man in a stained vest appeared, wiping his hands on a rag. "Storm pushing folks south," he said, eyeing them. "You two look like you've been riding from hell itself." "Just need the horses seen to," Jude said. "And a room." Temperance added. The man nodded, cautious. Check with Miss Liddy at the boarding house. Down the end. Third place on the left. Jude handed the reins over with a look that said, don't ask questions, and they made their way down the muddy road. Boots squelched in the muck. Temperance pulled her scarf higher, eyes scanning the windows, the alleys. She felt exposed, hunted. Miss Liddy was a hawk-faced woman with tobacco teeth and no patience for pleasantries. But her eyes softened when she looked at Temperance. You're lucky, she said. Last room just opened. Widow Cobb took sick. Might not be coming back. Temperance didn't ask how or why. They took the room. It was a box with a bed and a stove, a cracked mirror on the wall, and a window facing the back alley. Jude insisted on checking the window locks first, then the door, then the floorboards. Temperance watched him work, admiring the way his instinct moved ahead of him. Always alert, never still. You trust this place? She asked. No. She cracked the window and let the wind in. You think they're still following us? He didn't answer. That night, Ash Ridge felt like a waiting room to nowhere. She lay on the bed in her boots, while Jude sat in the corner chair, cleaning his rifle in slow, methodical strokes. Thunder rolled in the distance. Where will you go? She asked suddenly. He didn't look up. Don't know. You always planned to run? He hesitated. I used to think if I rode far enough, I'd find a place that didn't remember what I'd done. But every trail just leads to another ghost town. Or a grave. She looked down at her bandaged hands. Maybe we stop running. He set the rifle aside. You mean settle? I mean fight. If they're coming, we stop them here. Jude stood, crossed the room in 3 strides. You know what you're saying? I do. He studied her. She didn't flinch. That night, they made preparations. At dawn, they scouted the edge of town, mapped the alleys, marked escape routes. Jude bought ammunition from the blacksmith under the guise of rabbit hunting. Temperance spoke to Miss Liddy, warning her in veiled terms to be ready to bolt if strangers came looking with guns and bad intent. By sundown, the sky darkened again. It was Jude who spotted the riders first. 2 men at the ridge, watching. He cursed under his breath. Scouts. They'll be here by nightfall. How many? Could be 3. Could be 10. They returned to the room. Loaded weapons. Boiled water. Waited. The first shot shattered the boarding house window. Jude pulled her down just as the glass exploded. He rolled to the stove, returned fire through the hole. Yells rang out below. The crack of hoofs. Boots on wood. Temperance scrambled for the revolver, heart thudding like a war drum. They came fast, 4 men, maybe 5. One tried the front door, another the alley. Jude dropped the first with a clean shot to the chest. The second got through the back and caught a skillet to the face. Temperance followed with a bullet to his leg. She didn't think. She moved, blood soaked into the floorboards. Screams echoed through the walls. Then silence. They held their breath. Jude crept to the window, looked out, then down. A man lay in the alley, face down in snow. One of Boone's from the look of the brand on his belt buckle. 3 down, Jude muttered. And Boone. Not here yet. That was what scared him. Temperance could feel it in his voice. They heard horses again, minutes later. Hooves. Then a voice that cut through the silence like a broken bottle. Callahan. Temperance flinched. Jude's spine straightened. Come out now, or we'll burn it all down. Again. Boone. Temperance gripped the revolver tighter. Jude stood, stepped into the open. No cover. Just shadow and grit. I told you before, Jude said, voice cold. I don't run. Boone's laugh was ugly. You always were a fool for a lost cause. That woman with you. She's the new one. Huh? You sure know how to pick your ghosts. Jude raised his rifle. You'll be the last one I bury. Boone moved into the street, gun drawn. 2 others flanked him, but they looked uneasy. Thing is, Boone said, voice slow, you already buried yourself. You just didn't know it. Then he drew first. Jude fired. Boone stumbled. A shot rang out. Temperance screamed, but it wasn't Jude who fell. The man to Boone's right dropped like a stone. Then the other. Temperance stepped forward from the alley, smoke rising from a revolver. Boone turned, bleeding, eyes wide with shock. You, he hissed. Stupid little. Jude fired again. This time Boone went down for good. The silence afterward rang louder than the gunfire. Temperance stood still, breath fogging in the cold air. Jude lowered his weapon. Around them, Ash Ridge began to stir. Doors creaked open, eyes peeked from behind curtains. They didn't wait for applause. There was none to be had. Back in the room, they packed their things. Miss Liddy met them at the door, face pale. "Town don't need this kind of trouble. We're leaving," Jude said. Temperance nodded. "I taught him a lesson. That's all I had left to give." They rode out as the sun broke through the clouds. The prairie stretched ahead, long and wide and unknowable. "You still want to run?" she asked as they crested the hill. Jude looked at her. "No," he said. "Not anymore." She smiled faintly. "Then where to?" He glanced east, then west. "Wherever we're needed." They rode side by side, snow melting behind them, the road ahead clear. And if they carried ghosts, they did so together. Two hearts forged in fire and frost, riding not away from something, but toward whatever fate lay beyond the next ridge.